One of the greatest revolutions that the Rebbe made in this generation is unquestionably the concept of Shlichus. That there are young men and women for the last 50, 60 years, that they go out from a center of Yiddishkeit, whether it's New York or Chicago or any normal place, and they go out to the furthest corners of the world, to places where there's no Yiddishkeit, or maybe there's very minimal Yiddishkeit, but for sure they don't have all the good stuff that you have in the regular centers. They don't have kosher food, they don't have Chol of Yisrael, etc., etc. Everybody knows what the concept of Shlichus is. And the Rebbe started this subject of going out, and literally we have to conquer the world, and we have to literally bring back the whole world to the point that you could see that this is the Rebbe's world. This is generally the concept of Shlichus. And trust me, this wasn't an easy thing. The Rebbe had to speak and explain and go through who knows what in order to get to that point. Where Baruch Hashem today you have hundreds and thousands of shluchim. Baruch Hashem, as I mentioned several times already, I have the Shlichus that my parents were sent on Shlichus by the Rebbe over 50 years ago. Those days my parents, they went to Italy, and they're still there, Baruch Hashem, zu lange Jahren. And at that time, to go from New York to Italy was basically unheard of. And I remember even later when I was a bocher, I used to meet my mother's friends, my mother did not go to Beis Rivka. Those days there was no Beis Rivka. My mother went to Beis Yaakov. And all her friends told me that when my mother went on Shlichus, my parents went on Shlichus, this was a total novelty. And everybody was telling them, how could you do something like this? And it's bittul Torah. And my father should remain in Kolel and sit and learn for the next 30, 40 years. And of course, my father did not do that, and my parents went on Shlichus, and Baruch Hashem now, the place where they went on Shlichus, Italy, is a Mokem Torah, it's a Ir Ve'em B'Yisrael, something that at that time nobody even fathomed. It is obviously the Rebbe's view, the Rebbe's outlook on the world, that this is the Rebbe's place, that obviously got it where it is. But there's something that we have to remember. There's nothing that the Rebbe does, any campaign, any subject that the Rebbe undertakes, everything has a mocker in Torah, everything has a source. Even this concept of Shlichus has unbelievable sources in the Torah of what's this idea of taking Jungelite, that they would be able to sit and learn for the next 30, 40, 50 years. And the Rebbe sort of pulled them out, and he says, your job is to go out there and be meifitz Torah and Yadus and share it with other Yidden who don't know Aleph Beis yet, and give it also to them. So what we're going to do today is one of the earliest Sichos of the Rebbe on this subject. And there are dozens and dozens and perhaps hundreds of Sichos on this subject. By the way, there's a sefer called Torah Shlichus, as you can see here. It has hundreds of pages, over 470 pages of Sichos of the Rebbe, and this is only a fraction of the Sichos of the Rebbe that discuss the whole concept of Shlichus. It's not just like that. The Rebbe just took you in Galite, said go. The Rebbe went and explained from all types of angles of why this is the Tzav HaShah, why this is what we need to do in our generation. So we're going to go through, as I mentioned before, one of the earliest, which is in Likutei Sichos Chelik Zayin, in Likutei Sichos Volume 7. This is on pages from 134 to 138 in Likutei Sichos Chelik Zayin. And this is on Parsha Kedoshim. And go to your source number 1. Here in the Torah, it tells us a very interesting halacha. What's the halacha? Source number 1. Parsha Kedoshim, Perek Tes, Pasuk Chav Gimel. The Torah says as follows: V'chisavoyu el haaretz, when you will come to the land, unetatem kol eitz machal, and you are going to plant a tree which gives out very good fruit. Says the Torah halacha, ve'araltem orlosoi espirioi. You have to sort of block it from being used for a certain period of time, like a orla, like a cover. The first 3 years of planting a tree, you cannot eat from that tree. This is the halacha, which is called Orla. Again, what is Orla? The first 3 years when you plant a tree, you're not allowed to eat from that fruit. Continues the Torah, Uvashano harvis, in the 4th year, Yihye kol piryei, all the fruit that comes out from this tree, Kedoshim Lashem. It should be holy for a praise to the Eibishter. As we're going to see soon, what does that mean to praise? You take this fruit and you bring it to Yerusholayim and you praise the Eibishter with it. Continues the Torah, Uvashana chamishis, however, the 5th year, finally, toichlu kol pirya, you're allowed to eat all the fruit, lehoisif lachem tvosei, in order to add to your produce, to your crop. Which means the Rebbe is saying, if 3 years you won't touch the fruit, the 4th year you're going to bring it to Yerushalayim, this will make that the 5th year, the reward is going to be as such that you're going to get a lot of fruit out of it. Ani Hashem Elokeichem. And as Rashi makes it very clear that this is the translation of the pasuk, look at source number 2. Says Rashi, Lahoisif lachem tvosei, to add to your tvua, to your crop. Says Rashi, ha mitzvah hazois shetishmeru, this mitzvah that you are going to observe, tiyeh lahoisif lachem tvosei. What's the purpose of it? To add to your crop. There should be additional crop. Shebischara, the reward is going to be that ani mevarech lachem peiros hanitiyah. The Rebbe is going to give a special blessing into the fruit of your planting. And Rashi adds, Rabbi Kiva used to say, Dibra Torah keneged Yetzer hara. These words the Torah said because the Torah was talking to the Yetzer hara, to the evil inclination. Why? A person shouldn't say, 4 years I am toiling and sweating and schwitzing and have pain with this tree for no reason. Says Lefikach, therefore says the Eibishter, don't worry, it's worth it, the 4 years that you cannot use these fruit regular, the 3 years and the 4th year in Yerushalayim. Why? Because ultimately this is what's going to add to your crop. So far so good? Say it. Now let's try to analyze this a little bit. First of all, I have to make it very clear that in the later volumes in Likutei Sichos, Garelik Chav Beis, there's another whole Sicha where the Rebbe discusses this Rashi alone. But that's not what we're going to do today. Today we're just going to analyze this concept of the 3 years and the 4th year. What is this exactly? Why can't you eat the Orla the 3rd year? Why does the 4th year have to be in Yerushalayim? What's so special about the 5th year that the Rebbe that the 5th year, that's when the Rebbe is going to give a lot of Torah? Let's analyze this a little bit. Go to source number 3. Source number 3 is a medrash on this pasuk here. The medrash in Vayikra Rabbim Parsha Chav Hei says the medrash as follows: Dorash Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi. Rabbi Yehuda ben Pazi was Dorash. He said, Mi yigale ofer me'einecha Adam Arishan. Adam Arishan, who is going to take off the dust off your eyes? In other words, who is going to take away the shame from you? Why? The Rebbe asked you for 1 hour, don't touch the fruit, and you couldn't hold yourself back. Your children, the Yidden, are holding out for 3 years not to have the fruit. So in other words, Adam Arishan, you couldn't hold even 1 hour, and look at your children, they're holding for 3 years. This is what the Medrash says. Now wait a minute. What's the connection between the 3 years of Orla to Adam Arishan? Explains the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, in Likutei Torah, in the Sefer Likutei Torah, in our Parsha Kedoshim, on page Chavtes, look at source number 4. Says the Alter Rebbe, mitzvah zu, this mitzvah of Orla, why can't we eat for 3 years? Hu letikun chet eitzadas. It is actually to be metaken, to rectify the sin of eitzadas of Adam Rishon. Shenemar by Gamkein, by Eitz Hadas, we find also, by the Eitz Hadas, we find the same exact expression as in our pasuk. In our pasuk is source number 1. What do we say? V'chisavayu al aretz untatem kol eitz machol. You're going to plant all the trees that gives out fruit, food. Says over here, also, by us it says, go back to source number 4, the second line. It says, Nemar begamkin kiteva eitz lamachol. It says the same thing. Ve'adam Rishon itztave olav b'shates. Adam Rishon, in the 9th hour of the day, he was commanded not to eat from the Eitz Hadas. U'b'shah yud avar. On the 10th hour, he already transgressed it. Ve'iluhim tingimel shoyes ad Shabbos. Had he waited 3 hours till Shabbos, hayakol piryoy kodesh ilulim. All the food, all the fruit would have been fruit of praise to the Eibishter. Therefore, ukenegdam nitztavu benitiyah shalei shanim yilachem arelim. Therefore, because of that hours, the Rebbe told the Yidden that they should not eat the fruit for the first 3 years. Continues the Alter Rebbe, Vezehu kavanas hamedrash. This is what the Medrash says that we mentioned before in source number 3. Veharei bonecha mamtinin, that your children wait 3 years. Shebazeh, through the fact that the Yidden wait 3 years, he metaknim chet Adam Rishon beit hadas. With this, they rectify the sin of Adam Rishon in the Eitz Hadas. Continues the Alter Rebbe, Vehine, Perush b'shana harvis. What does it mean that the 4th year the fruit is going to be a praise to the Eibishter? Says the Alter Rebbe, Hainu, shehem nechalim lebailim b'Yerusholayim, that the owners, they eat these fruits where? In Yerusholayim. What is that? A praise? Says the Alter Rebbe, V'davar zeh hilulim l'Hashemhu, and this thing is a praise to the Eibishter. Why is it a praise? Shenois eisham leshabeach ulehalel Hashemayim. Why does he bring this fruit to Yerusholayim? In order to thank the Eibishter for the fruit. And that's what it says in the pasuk. V'hinei ksiv, as it says in the pasuk. We say it every Shabbos morning from Tehillim. Our feet were standing in Yerushalayim. Why? Because what happened in Yerusholayim? Shesham alu shivteika, because over there the Shvatim, the tribes of the Yidden came up lehoidos l'shem Hashem, to praise the Eibishter. When was that? The 4th year of the crop. So now we understand what the connection is. Why the first 3 years we cannot have the fruit? Because it is a takana, it is something the tikkun for the chet of Adam Rishon, to fix the chet of Adam Rishon. What's in the 4th year? In the 4th year, it is a praise for the Eibishter. Comes the Alter Rebbe, and he asks a question. Look at your source number 5. Continues the Alter Rebbe, V'yesh lehavin inyan hahidah. We have to understand, what is this praise? V'hahilul she'anur mehallim oisa yizbarech le'ezen inyanhu. What's the purpose of praising the Eibishter? We praise the Eibishter. As we say in davening, the Eibishter is way above the blessings and the praisings that a human can give. The Eibishter is infinite. A human is this little thing over there. And you want to tell me that this little thing that the person does praises the Eibishter? A human can't, even if he wants to, cannot praise the Eibishter. They're so far removed from each other. Answers the Alter Rebbe, Achoinyan, what is this concept of the praise? Al pi ma shekasuv ve'ato kodesh yoshev tehilos Yisrael. That the Eibishter, what does he live on? What does he sit on? What is his livelihood? Yoshev tehilos Yisrael. He sits on the praises of the Yidden. When the Yidden praise the Eibishter, the Eibishter becomes very excited and very happy. Now, we need to understand, what does this mean? That when a Yid praises the Eibishter sits on that. This is what gives the Eibishter his chayas, as we're going to see soon. But this is the concept of the fruit of the 4th year. But let's now analyze a little more. We said one thing about the 3 years, that the 3 years that we don't eat the fruit. Why is that? As a tikkun for the chet of Adam Rishon. Comes the question, why 3 years? What's the number 3? He was only 1 hour. What's up as 3? Continues the Alter Rebbe in Likutei Sichos over there. Says Alter Rebbe, Mashekosuf bePardis Sharchav Dalet. What it says in one of the Sifrei Kabbalah, which is called the Pardis, it says over there as follows: B'Seifei, the Mashekosuf Sholish Shonim Yilachem Arelim. What is this concept of the 3 years of Orla Arelim? Why is it 3? Zehu Keneged Gimel Klipay Satmeyes. This is for the 3 negative, impure klipos, shells. I'm going to explain that in a minute. 1 minute. V'harevis, the 4th year, who klipas noiga, klipa dako hanikras noiga shecholim laloisa. There is one of these shells, the 4th one, which is called klipas noiga, which is a sort of a shell which is a little more bright, and this one is one that you can raise. What does it mean? Very briefly, anybody who learned a little bit of Tanya, especially in the 1st chapter, the Alter Rebbe explains that. The Alter Rebbe explains that we are now in a world which is called Olam Hazeh. In the world, we don't see godliness. There are just too many things that cover up ungodliness. They are like a shell, just like when you have a fruit, for example. You want the actual fruit, you have to take off the shell, and then you can have the fruit. The same thing is, there are certain, I would say, forces of nature, let's say. They cover up on the Eibishter. And they are basically 3 of these covers. They're called a sholish klipos atmeis. They're 3 shells that are tamei, that are impure. So we have to remove these 3 and get rid of them. Then there's a 4th one with a klipas noiga, which is sort of a in-between. Like, for example, not like a regular shell, but let's say if you have an item which is in a, let's say, in a plastic bag. So the plastic bag on the one hand is a cover on the object. On the other hand, it's transparent and you could see the product. So it's a cover and it's not a cover, it's both. And this is what klipas noiga is. So the sholish klipas atmeis, there's nothing we can do with them. There's only one way, you just have to get rid of them. The klipas noiga is something you can deal with it. And Alter Rebbe in Tanya explains that the person has a nefesh abamis, where it comes from. There's certain parts that come from the sholish klipas atmeis, some parts that come from klipas noiga, etc. But at least this concept of Orla, why is it 3? Because it comes from the sholish klipas atmeis, the 3 shells of tumah, and therefore we cannot touch them. The 4th year, that's already something that can be elevated, so therefore that we take to Yerusholayim and we elevate that. Look in your source number 7. The Alter Rebbe also in Tanya brings this subject, in Tanya Perik Lamed Zayin, in that little Hago, in the note on the side. If you open up a Tanya, you can see it. It says the Alter Rebbe, Sheha Orla, hi mesholish klipos atmeis legamri. Orla is from the sholish klipos atmeis, from the 3 shells which are totally out. We cannot have anything to do with that. Then comes the Alter Rebbe and says that there's also a little bit of a higher level, how we could look at these 3 years and the 4th year. Why the 3 years are sort of out, and the 4th year is already something we can work with. And what is this 5th year? The Alter Rebbe here in Likutei Torah doesn't explain what's the 5th year. Comes the Alter Rebbe later in Likutei Torah and explains, go to your source number 8. We could say even more. That these 3 years of Orla, hem keneged bria yetzira asiya. Again, for those of you who have learned a little bit of Chassidus, you know that there's something called the Seder Hishtalshlus, the system of events from the Eibishter until this planet Earth, that there had to be all kinds of levels in order to be able to come into this world, just like a teacher that wants to teach to his to young children a very deep concept. He cannot just say it the way he understands it. He has to give an example, and he has to give all different types of bringing it down in order for the children and the students to be able to understand it. So in the Seder Hishtalshelus, there's something which is called the 4 worlds. Atzilus, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. These are 4 spiritual worlds, but it's divided into 2 sections. The lower 3, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya, they are closer to the bottom world. Atzilus is already closer to God, and that's already on a higher level. That's the 4th. On top of them, you have a place which is called Keser, the crown. So therefore, says the Alter Rebbe, let's go again to source number 8, that Orla, Hem Keneged, Bria, Yetzira, Asiya. Orla are the 3 lowest levels. That is why we cannot touch them. Bashana Haravi is the fourth one, Keneged Olam Hatzilus, the fourth world, the one which is on top, which is closer to the Eibishter. Ubashana HaChamishis Lahaistil Flachem Tvosoi, that fifth year which is on top, that is Bchinas HaKeser, that's the crown. This is what the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah. So now what we need to understand is something very, very simple. We are saying that the first 3 years we cannot touch because they are the lowest level. The fourth year, that's already Atzilus, that's already closer to God. We can fix that, we can do something with it. That we have to take to Yerusholayim in order to elevate it. The fifth year is an even higher level than the fourth year. It's even higher than Atzilus. It comes from Kesef, from the crown. What do we say with that fruit? The fifth year, you could eat wherever you want. You could eat even if you're impure. Anybody can eat it. There's absolutely no restrictions whatsoever. So the question is, wait a minute. The ones of the fifth year are from the highest level. They're even higher than the fourth year. The fourth year, you're still restricting me that I have to eat it only in Yerushalayim because it's already on a higher level. So the one from the fifth year should have been who knows what. Comes the Rebbe and says, no, the fifth year? No, the fifth year now anybody could eat, even someone who's impure, even Betuma. Why? What happened to the fifth year? It's supposed to be the highest level. So we need to understand why Tak is the fifth year, the highest level, and at the same time on the lowest, because anybody's allowed to have it. So we have to understand, what is this fifth year? What is it? We find something very, very interesting in this Sikha, Chelik Zayin. Normally, the Rebbe doesn't bring stories in Likutei Sichos. Here, the Rebbe brings a whole beautiful story that the previous Rebbe said in a Maimer. Now, by the way, even those who are not very familiar with a lot of Chassidus, there's a Sefer from the Frierdiker Rebbe called Sefer HaMaimorim Yiddish. And these were very easy Maimorim, sort of, that the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, said when he came to America. And then they came out in a volume by itself. They are very, very beautiful, easygoing reading Maimorim. And one of them is called Ve'ato Kodesh Yeshev Tehillos Yisrael, which is the pasuk, if you remember in source number 5, where the Alter Rebbe said that what is the concept of this fruit that we praise the Eibishter with after the fourth year, goes on the pasuk Ve'ato Kodesh Yeshev Tehillos Yisrael, that the Eibishter, Kodesh, is holy. What does it sit on? The Tehillos Yisrael, the praises of the Yidden. What is this? So there's a beautiful Maimer from the Frierdiker Rebbe in Sefer HaMaimorim Yiddish, page 138. Look at your source number 9. And the Maimer starts with the words, Ve'ato Kodesh Yeshev Tehillos Yisrael. You, God, who are holy, what do you sit on? The praises of the Eibishter. Says the Rebbe, Und du Heiliger sitzt zu Herren die Leubigen von Yidden. You, Hashem, are sitting to get the praises of the Yidden. As the Medrash says, Omar Rab Shmuel, Kol Kilus ve'Kilus she'Yisrael mekanzel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. All the praises that the Yidden do to the Eibishter, Kvoida Yeshev b'neihem. The Eibishter sits amongst them. And then the Rebbe translates into Yiddish. Reb Shmuel sagt, jeder Leubung und Leubung, was die Yidden Leubung Gott Baruch Hu, is sehr heilig Kerkovit zwischen sie. Comes the Rebbe, the Frierdiker Rebbe, and it continues as follows. The Alte Rebbe, der Baal Tanya, when is given by sein Rebbe, the Mizritcher Magid, when he was by his teacher, the Mizritcher Magid, hat der Rebbe, the Mizritcher Magid, einmal erzählt das Sipur, the Mizritcher Magid said a story, was hat passiert mit sein Rebbe, what happened with his Rebbe, the heilige Baal Shem Tov, the holy Baal Shem Tov. And the Rebbe says as follows. The heilige Baal Shem Tov, when he was still a nister, when he was still hidden, nobody knew yet that he was this great tzaddik. Und hat gewandert von Stadt zu Stadt und von Dorf zu Dorf. And he was wandering from city to city, from village to village, because he used to talk to the simple people. Is by the heilige Baal Shem Tov given eine von seine Avodas HaKodesh, one of the holy Avodas, one of the holy worships of the Baal Shem Tov, his conduct was zu fragen bei jeden Iden, to ask every single Jew, Männer, Frühe, alt und jung, whether it was men, whether it's ladies, young, old, children, everybody. Wie es geht ihnen gesund? How is it going in their health? How are they doing? Was macht ihr? How are you? Noch gefragt sich auf jeden Kind, wie ist in gesund. Asked every child how he is in his health. Voneinander gefragt sich, wie es geht in Parnasse. He used to ask all types of questions. How are you in your livelihood, in your Parnasse? Und ist gewesen sehr zufrieden zu hören, and he was very happy to hear die sehr liebe Antworten, was die Jiden, Männer, Frauen und Kinder pflegen ihm antworten. He used to be so happy to hear how everybody used to reply. What did they say? Mit verschiedenen gottleibnischen Aussprachen. In different ways how they praised Hashem. They said Boruch Hashem or Gelobt Hashem is Baruch. The Baal Shem Tov used to hear how they say, thank you Hashem for the food that I have, for the health that I have. The Baal Shem Tov, it made his day. Look, go to source number 10. Then the Friedrich Rebbe continues another whole thing. Then he says as follows. Einmal hat passiert. One time it happened. As the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, is gekommen in a gewisse yishuv. That the Baal Shem Tov came to a certain little a place, a small little area. Hat der Rebbe, der Baal Shem Tov, sich geführt mit seinem heiligen Seder in Avodas Hashem Yisborach. The Baal Shem Tov continued in this custom that he had, auf Mezake zu sein, die Jiden, to give this honor to the Jiden, Männer, Frauen und Kinder, mit der größten Schus, was die Leuben Gott Baruch Hu's heiligen Namen, with the very great schus, merit of thanking Hashem. In Yenim Yeshuv, in that area, is given a Yid, there was a certain Jew, a gor tiefer zoken, a very old man, a größer Talmud Chacham, he was a big Talmud Chacham, a very big Torah scholar, a Porush, he was like a hermit, he was, these guys who are closed in their area, von alle weltliche Sachen, he was totally removed from anything mundane. Schon über a Yovel, 50 Jahre, it's over 50 years, as sitzt Yomam Valayla, that he's sitting day and night, und lernt die heilige Torah beprishus und bekdusha. And he's learning Torah over 50 years, closed off in his area, in his holiness. Alle seine Jahren is a Yoshev betainis and talis and tefillin, a whole day, all these years, he sits a whole day in his talis and his tefillin, and bis spätiger Mincha, until very late Mincha, und erst nach Tfilas Arvis, and only after Ma'ariv, after the night prayers, is toyem a shtikel brot mit Wasser. He only then has only a small little piece of bread and a little bit of water. This is this person who's secluded. Source number 11. Let's continue the story. When the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, is reingegangen zu dem Goyen, when the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, went into this Goyen, in the precious stable, in that little quarantine where he used to be sitting on his own, was is given in a Wilken for the shul, which was in the corner of the shul, of the synagogue, hat the Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, gefragt bei der Goyen. The Rebbe, the Baal Shem Tov, went over to this Goyen, and he asked him, wie geht es ihm gesund? How are you doing health-wise? Do you have everything that you need? Der Goyen sich auf dem Rebbe. The Goyen looked at the Baal Shem Tov, welches gewesen gekleidet wie a Poshet the Dorfsman. He was dressed like a very simple peasant. Nicht umgeguckt. The Goyen didn't even look at the Baal Shem Tov. He sees this peasant asking him these simple questions, mundane questions. Source number 12. The Rebbe hat etliche Mal gefragt die Fragen, and the Baal Shem Tov insisted. He asked once and again the same question. Bis der Goyen is geworden sehr beis, until this genius got very angry, und macht zum Rebbe mit der Hand, and he makes with his hand over there, anweisung auf the Tier, he shows him the door, as soll weggehen. He wants him to leave. Sagt der Rebbe der Baal Shem Tov zum Goyen. Says the Baal Shem Tov to the Goyen. Rebbe, Baal Shem Tov says, Far was gibt nicht den Kevayochel sein Parnasse? Why don't you give the Kevayochel, those who don't know Chassidus call the Eibishter the Kevayochel, the so-called. Why don't you give the so-called his Parnasse? Why don't you give him his livelihood? Ir vet doch chas v'sholem den Kevayochel verhungern. If you don't give him his livelihood, you're going to make God very hungry. Und der Kevayochel wird weg von der Welt. And then God is just going to leave this world because he doesn't have any food and he's just going to starve. Go to source number 13. When this Porush heard these words, is der Goin geblieben wie zu Tumult. This person who was so engrossed in his own life, he was so confused, he got so perplexed. You have this peasant who is talking about the Eibishter. As mit darf der Kavayachol geben Parnasse, that we have to give the Rebbe his livelihood. Mit darf sich sorgen, and we have to worry as der Kavayachol soll nicht verhungert werden, that the Rebbe should not get hungry und weg von der Welt, and this way he's not going to leave this world. He never heard such a language. What does that mean? To give the Rebbe his food? Source number 14. Der Rebbe, der Baal Shem Tov, der kennt die Machshavos von dem Goyen. The Baal Shem Tov saw what the perplexed that this Goyen, all these questions, that he was very confused about this. Zoktertzim, and he said these words. And now we're getting to the punchline. Die Yidden sitzen auf der Parnasse, was Hashem is Baruch Gidze. The Yidden live on the Parnasse that the Rebbe gives to the Yidden. This is how it works. However, says the Baal Shem Tov, what is the livelihood of the Eibishter? The livelihood of the Yidden, they get from the Eibishter. But where does the Eibishter get his livelihood? Says the Baal Shem Tov, David HaMelech in Tehillim. This is what David HaMelech tells us in Tehillim. That's the pasuk that we said before in source number 5 and in the beginning of number 9. Which pasuk? Ve'ato kadosh yoshev tehilos Yisrael. What does that mean? Ve'ato kadosh, you Heilike, you the Eibishter. On what livelihood do you sit? How do you sustain yourself? Yoshev, how does he sit? How does he maintain himself? Tehilos Yisrael. Der Kavayachol sitzt auf die jüdische Leibungen, was Eden leben in Boruch Hashem for gesunde Parnasse. Der Eibishter lives, what's his livelihood? When Yidden realize that their Parnasse, their livelihood, their food, their gesund, where does that come from? The Eibishter. And they say Boruch Hashem, they praise the Eibishter. And how the Rebbe is good to them. And for the Leibwerter was Eden, Leib Hashem is Baruch. And because the Yidden praise the Eibishter for what he gives them, Gitter Baruch Hu di Bonne Chayim Zeine Revicha. Because the Yidden say Baruch Hashem, thank you Hashem, for the mundane, simple, material things that they have, like gesund, health, and parnasa, the Rebbe gives them even more. This is the story of the Baal Shem Tov, how he explained it to this Porush. What we need to understand over here is, what does this mean? That you have to feed the Eibishter, give him his parnasa. Why couldn't it be done through the learning of Torah? The Porush, by learning Torah, he is giving the Eibishter his parnasa. Why is it only by saying Baruch Hashem for mundane things? Even if you have to do it by thanking Hashem, so he could just thank the Eibishter for giving him the opportunity to sit and learn Torah like that. Why does the thanking of the Eibishter have to be on mundane things, on material things? Why can't it be for the Torah? And that's what the Baal Shem Tov came to the Porush and said, you're missing the point. What is it? Where did the Baal Shem Tov take this from? Explains the Rebbe, go to your source number 15. It's based on a medrash. The medrash, which we discussed many times in our classes, the medrash in Tanchumim, Parsha Nosei, and the Alter Rebbe brings it in Tanya, in Perek Lamed Vav, chapter 36, the famous medrash, source number 15, yeah? It's a known thing what the Chachamim tell us. What's the purpose of this whole creation of the world? Why did God create this world? Says the Medrash, and is Ava Kodesh Baruch Hu liyos loy dira betachtonim. The Rebbe wanted to have a living quarter where? Not above, not in these lofty places. Tachtonim, in the lowest level, in planet Earth, in a place where there's materialism, where there's mundane things, simple things, low things. This is where the Rebbe wants it. Why? We don't know. Nis'ava Kadosh Baruch Hu. This is something that the Rebbe wanted, period. And as we discussed in many shiurim, and there's a lot of Maimorim from the Rebbe Rashab, in Tafresh Samach Vav, and in other places, and that the Rebbe discusses it in many Sichos, but that is the bottom line. That the Rebbe wants a dira. Where does he want to have his dwelling place? Betachtoinim, in the lowest levels. And that is why, when Yidden realize that there's simple things, even simple things like food, health, that also comes from the Eibishter. The fact that Torah comes from the Eibishter, that's obvious. But that even on simple things, over there, the Eibishter is in there. This is all Eibishter. This is where we make a dira b'tachtonim. Where do we see this? Look in source number 16. What does the Alter Rebbe say in Tanya in Perek Lamed Zayin in chapter 37? The neshama did not come down to this world because she needs to be fixed. She needs to have any rectifications. No. What's the reason that the neshama comes down here on planet Earth and go into a body of flesh and blood and meat and bones? To take this material world, this body, the guf and the nefesh habamis and the evil inclination, the animal soul that a person has, and take them and elevate them. This is why the neshama comes down to this world, to take the lowest and elevate it. And the Rebbe stresses it even more in Likutei Sichos over here in this Sicha. Look at your source number 17. Likutei Sichos, the Rebbe says as follows. This house for the Eibishter, this dwelling place, this house, how is it done? Especially through that a person deals with very low things which are on a very low level. Not so much through limud Torah, the learning of Torah, or to thank the Eibishter for the fact that he could sit and learn Torah. Why? By limud Torah is beike shaykh zu dem elyon was is da bei Eden. Limud Torah, the concept of learning Torah, is more on the higher level of a person, on his spiritual side. To the nefesh elikis, to the, as we all know, that a person has a godly soul and an animal soul. Obviously, the godly soul is on a much higher level than the animal soul, and limud Torah has to do more with the godly soul. Where do we make the dira b'tachtonim? Through that we praise the Eibishter, as the Rebbe puts it in quotations, gesundum parnose, health and livelihood, which they have to do with their body and with the nefesh habamis. And now we understand why the Baal Shem Tov, when he came to the Porush was dealing only with his holy side, with his the godly soul, with limud Torah, only with that, and he was forgetting that the Eibishter is not only there, the Eibishter is also in Tachtonim, and not also in Tachtonim. The dira of the Eibishter, the dwelling place of the Eibishter, his living quarters is in Tachtonim. And this is what the Baal Shem Tov asked him. Why don't you worry about the dira b'tachtonim? Don't only think about yourself, you have to think also about the Eibishter. So now the question is, why did the Baal Shem Tov have to stop him in the middle of learning? Why did he stop in the middle of learning? Learning is the highest thing, isn't it? As we see, look in your source number 18. The Alter Rebbe says in Hilchos Talmud Torah, in the section of the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, there's a section called Hilchos Talmud Torah, the laws of learning Torah. In the 4th chapter, in the 3rd halacha, says the Alter Rebbe, what happens if a person has a choice between doing a mitzvah or learning Torah? Says the Alter Rebbe, if the mitzvah could be done through somebody else, lo yafsik talmudai, a person should not stop learning. Why? As the Alter Rebbe explains later, because mitzvahs Talmud Torah shkula keneged kol mitzvahs. The mitzvahs Talmud Torah is just as much, is worth more than all the other mitzvahs. If you put on a scale limud Torah on one side and all the mitzvahs on the other, they will be equal. So therefore we see that limud Torah, the learning of Torah, is on the highest level. So why did the Alter Rebbe stop him from his learning? Answers the Rebbe. Look at source number 18 from a Gemara. The Gemara says in Yevamis daf 2 kuf tes amid beis, says the Gemara as follows. Source number 19. Kol ha'omer ein li elo Torah. If someone says, I only have Torah, I'm going to sit and learn Torah 24/7, and I'm not going to do anything else but learn Torah. Says the Gemara, afilu Torah ein lo. Even Torah he doesn't have. Why? Because a person also has to do mitzvahs, which the mitzvahs seem to be dealing with mundane things, with material things. he has to do that. If he does that, then he also has Torah. If he does only Torah, he missed the point. And the Rebbe says it even clearer. You look at source number 20. This is a sikha that the Rebbe said on Gimel Tammuz in the year Tafshim Memches, after the Rebbetzin passed away, the first Gimel Tammuz after that. The Rebbe said a very, very strong point, which he discussed many times before, but then he said it much stronger. Look at your source number 20. The Rebbe brought a Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Lamed Aleph Amud Aleph. The Gemara says as follows: B'shor shemachnisim adam ledin. After 120, when a person comes up Lamaila, comes up to the heavenly court, and they judge him. Oimrim loy. First question they ask him: Nasasav and Nasata be'emunah. Did you conduct your business, your occupation, with faith properly? Then comes the next question: Kavaita itim la Torah. Did you establish time to sit and learn Torah? Did you do this? Says the Rebbe, what do we see here? What's the first question? After 120 years, what's the first question? The first question is not regarding learning Torah. The first question is your occupation. Why did your neshama come down to this world? The occupation that your neshama came down to this world for is what? To birur hamata, to refine the world. How? To spreading Torah, Yiddishkeit all over. So the question is, so was your occupation, was it done in a way of emunah? What does it mean, emunah? Emunah is not only faith. Emunah means with, like someone does a job, a proper occupation. In its most complete way. Kolel gam miloshen umnus. Umnus means when somebody has a craft. He does something really well. So the first question that they ask him when a person comes up there: did you occupy yourself with what your neshama was sent down to this world for? And the Rebbe continues. Look at your source number 21. That Kvei Kedushas Muchadmur, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the previous Rebbe, Hitil al kol echad ve'echad es hatafkid ve'ashlichus, the previous Rebbe gave to every single person the Shlichus lasek bafotzas haTorah v'yadus, to go and spread Torah and Yiddishkeit. Bekasher oisik binyonim acherim, and when a person does other things, afilu inyonim achilaylim, even the things of the highest level. Shoyali Metzler, the Rebbe is going to ask him a question. Did you occupy yourself with the proper things? In other words, Yotaka dealt with great things. And because of this, you're going to get all types of rewards and Shayolamis, which is just 310 worlds. Aval, says the Rebbe, Hashayla. But the question they're going to ask you, and the Rebbe says, V'yaseirim is even more, Hashayla harishoinohi. What's the first question they're going to ask? What's with the occupation, with the main goal? Shebishvil zed, that for this purpose, Hiniach HaKadosh Baruch Hu es elyonim v'satachtoinim. It's expression for the Medrash that the Rebbe to put everything aside. What does the Rebbe to do every single day? Puts everything on the side. The Rebbe takes every single day your neshama, because at night when we go to sleep we give it to the Rebbe, and the Rebbe takes care of it, and the Rebbe gives it back to every single person, fresh, anew, to be able to do what the Rebbe wants him to do. So the Rebbe asks, I gave you back your neshama. Did you do what I asked you to do? And the Rebbe is going to ask, Heichan heim hayaladim, where are the children? Children in quotations, because it doesn't necessarily mean children in years, of your own children. It means people in their knowledge that they are still children, that they don't have enough knowledge. That you learned with them the Aleph Beis of Judaism. Where are the Jews that you brought back to Yiddishkeit? And the Rebbe goes very, very strong words over there. And the Rebbe says, "Ubifrat, and especially especially when you take in consideration the situation, the deplorable situation that we are into, that it's mamish a case of danger, pikuach nefesh, that there are hundreds of thousands of Jewish children that don't know even the aleph base of Judaism. So why does a neshama come down here to this world? To come down and spread Yiddishkeit. This is our job. Of course, the first years of life, you spend them in yeshiva to absorb as much as possible. And of course, a person has to learn a lot of Torah. There's no question about that. It says, you always have to learn Torah. But ultimately, what's the dira b'tachtonim? When we take that Torah and we engross the whole world, the whole mundane world, the simple world, the low world, and we take and we elevate everyone, that is the dira b'tachtonim. If that's the case, now we could go back and understand what's the fifth year. The third and fourth year, those are years that are very tough to touch. Those we put on the side. However, when we come to the fifth year, the fifth year is a total different story. Those are the highest. Why is it the highest? So go to source number 22. This is what the Rebbe finishes off the Sikha with. Durch dem was Sayid weiß. Through that a Jew knows, as afilu di peiris was eine nish kodesh, that even the fruit which is not holy. Which one? The ones of the fifth year. The fourth year are holy, you have to eat in Yerusholayim. The ones of the fifth year, they are just plain simple. There's nothing you have to do with them. And a person knows that as ezanin talu bebirkas Hashem, that why does this fruit come out? It's all thanks to the blessing of the Eibishter. Ubemeile loibter zicher dem Eibishter for them. So therefore, for sure, he thanks the Eibishter for them, and he makes a bracha, Baruch Hashem Elokeinu. Thank you, Hashem, for this apple that you gave me, for this parnasa that you give me, Baruch Hashem. Oder Hilul Hashem, this praise to Hashem is the Tehillah Yisrael, is the praising of the Jews. They are the ones who accomplish the ultimate goal of Ve'ato Kodesh, that the Rebbe, who is so holy, Yoshev, that he sits here together with us. Why? This is all through the Tehillah Yisrael. Which means that when we take the material things and we bring out the Eibishter which is in the material, this is what does the Dira B'Tachtonim. So now we understand why we say the 3 years Orla. The fourth year is holy because we have to elevate and bring him to Yerusholayim. However, the fifth year, which is the simple stuff, which is what we use in our daily life, and we thank the Eibishter for them, and we realize that that is where the Eibishter is. That's lahaisif lachem tuasei. That is where the Eibishter gives the special bracha. So now we can understand why it is this whole concept of Shlichus, as we started in the beginning, because the reason why the Rebbe put people here on earth is not only to deal with the lofty, with the Elikus, with the godliness. It is to show how in this world, because the Rebbe wants to have his dwelling place here in this world, how the world is godliness. And that takes a lot of work. And this is the reason why the Rebbe started this whole campaign of taking young men after they already got married. And they take them, send them to every single corner of the world to find every single Yid and to take every single thing in the world and utilize it for Torah. And this way, what are we going to accomplish? That the whole world will realize that this place is the Dira B'Tachtonim, is the dwelling place of the Eibishter. And even just this class alone could be a perfect example. We're using means like the internet. Officially, the internet is something which is treif, not allowed to touch it. The answer is no. The internet, of course, you have to be very careful because there are certain areas which you shouldn't. At the same time, the Rebbe gave a person a choice. When you utilize something, even as low as it may be, but you utilize it for Torah, and you use it as a means that now In the good old days, when someone gave a class, only 10, 100, 1,000 people maximum were able to be there. Today, we utilize the materialism of this world, and we give classes, and we have tens of thousands and perhaps millions of people learning Torah. This is unbelievable. That is Dira B'Tachtonim. And therefore, what's going to happen when Mashiach comes, we're not only going to see godliness up there, we are going to see how this whole world, with its impurity, how this is all godliness. Dira B'Tachtonim. And this is what this pasuk comes to tell us, that Bashana HaChamishis, the simple fruit, not the ones that you eat in Yerusholayim, the simple ones, L'hoisif lachem tvuase. That is where you see the Dira B'Tachtonim. And therefore, all of us have to do whatever we can. Of course, we have to sit and learn Torah, but our goal has to be to take that Torah and bring out in the world how everything in this world is godliness of the Eibishter. Every single Jew is a Jew, and regardless of his background, we have to elevate him and bring him back to his roots, and through this we accomplish the concept of Kadosh Baruch Hu liyes ledira, that the Eibishter want to have a dwelling place where? B'tachtonim, in the lowest levels. And when we do that, we are accomplishing the task. Any questions? Okay. If it's something so great, this whole concept of Shlichus, why don't we find this in the previous generations? Then Moshe Rabbeinu should have sent Shluchim. Yeshua, everybody should have done it. True, but everything has its time. First of all, as I mentioned before, the Rebbe, everything that the Rebbe does, everything has a source. For example, the Rebbe started the concept of mivtzat tefillin, going out to the street and stopping a Jew and putting on tefillin with him. Although this wasn't done in the previous generations, but for example, we do find that the Smag, the Sefer Mitzvahs Gadol, who was hundreds of years ago, he also used to have this concept of going out to the streets and getting people involved that they should put on tefillin and things like that. So we do find it before in history. The Rebbe basically rejuvenated the subject. This concept of sending out shluchim was in a very minimal way also by the previous Rabbein. There's a very famous story, I don't know if you know it, with Rabbi Yosef Balagola, Rabbi Yosef the coachman. You know the story? Oh, you don't know it? It's a very, very long story. I'm not going to go through it now, maybe perhaps in another shir. But to make a long story short, the Mittel Rebbe, the second Rebbe of Lubavitch, there's a whole booklet from the previous Rebbe called Pekeach Ivrim that was written for Rabbi Yosef Balagola. The Mittel Rebbe, the second Rebbe, he took one of the greatest Chassidim, an unbelievable genius, and he called him in one day and he said, Rabbi Yosef, I want you, it's a long story, but the point is, I want you to become a Balagola. I want you to become a coachman. Now, from a Goin, from a Rosh Yeshiva to a coachman, we're talking about, I can't even describe what that means, because a Rosh Yeshiva sits and learns Torah all day. And this, to become a coachman, that means he has to start learning how to deal with horses, how to smear the wheels of the wagons, and get dirty, and it's a different world. But the Mittel Rebbe told him to do it. The Chassidim listened to the Rebbe, and it was a long story how he was a Balagola for years, and then through one of his trips, he took a Yid who unfortunately fell in the dungeons. He became a poritz. He married a shikse. He had kids. It was a whole unbelievable thing, and he brought him back to Yiddishkeit. Once he brought him back to Yiddishkeit, and he came to the Mittel Rebbe, and he told him the whole story, etc. So then the Mittel Rebbe said, okay, now you don't have to be a Balagol anymore. Now you could go back to your learning Torah. So we see that this concept was already also in the previous years. Now the reason why it wasn't so prevalent like it is in our generation is very simple. Like the Rebbe explained in many other areas, the Rebbe made it very clear, because this is generation right before Mashiach is going to be revealed. Therefore, we have to finish up all the work that everybody else prepared for us. And since we are going to be the one who are going to be Zoiche, who are going to merit to see this Dira B'Tachtonim, therefore it is incumbent in our generation to go out and take this whole world, this whole material world, mundane world, whatever you want to call it, the lowest levels, and take it and raise it and bring it to its source. And that is why it is a schus. It is a very great merit, and at the same time a achrayus, a responsibility that our generation has, that we have to go out there and try to reach out to as many Yidden as possible, lahavdul also to as many goyim as possible, and teach them about the Sheva Mitzvahs B'nei Noach. This is a halach in the Rambam. And by this we're going to take the whole world, and we're going to literally change the world and show the world that this is not a jungle, this is the Eibishter's house. This is a dira betachtoinim. In the lowest levels, this is where that Eibishter lives. And we are going to be able to see it very, very soon through the coming of Mashiach Tzidkenu.